The jungle breathed slower now. What once sang with wild calls and fluttering wings now lay in silence, broken only by the wind brushing through dry leaves. Leora stepped softly through the mossy path, ears twitching, eyes glowing faintly in the shadows. Her people, the Elianae, once danced among trees filled with life. Now, only memory clung to the vines. She crouched beside a stream, watching the muddy trickle where clear water used to flow. In her hands rested a tiny creature wrapped in woven cloth. Its fur was patchy, breath weak. The last of its kind. The last forest kitten. Her throat tightened. She had searched for weeks, tracking its cries through dying woods. But she had no answers, no healing, only the fading warmth of hope. The elders had long given up. They blamed the poisons left by the skyships. They blamed the stars and the war and the humans. But Leora didn't care who was to blame anymore. She only wanted to save what was left. Then came the hum. Not of beasts, not of birds. A strange low vibration in the air. She looked up quickly and narrowed her eyes. A machine was descending between the trees. Smooth silver, human-made. Its lights blinked like cautious eyes. Leora darted back, hiding behind thick roots. Her grip on the kitten tightened. The machine opened slowly. From the soft hiss of pressure, a tall figure stepped out. It wore no helmet, only strange cloth and a device glowing on its chest. He was human. She had never seen one so close. He looked around, scanning the clearing, then knelt beside the dying stream. He dipped a small rod into the water, checked the readings, then sighed. His voice was low, troubled. Leora didn't understand the words, but his tone spoke of worry. He pulled out a small seed-like orb from his pack and dropped it into the stream. The water shimmered slightly. Something in the soil beneath it stirred. Leora's breath caught. Was he healing it? The human moved with care, planting small pods near the roots of the nearest tree. Blue light glowed softly from the soil. The air smelled fresher already. Her fingers loosened slightly from the kitten. It stirred. She looked down, then back at the human. He wasn't like the ones from the war. He wasn't burning the land or taking samples with cold eyes. He moved gently, as if the world still mattered. Curiosity pushed past fear. Leora stepped forward. A twig cracked beneath her foot. The human turned sharply. His eyes met hers. He froze. Neither of them moved. The kitten gave a faint mew. The human looked down at it, then back at her. Slowly, he raised his hands to show he meant no harm. He took off his pack and knelt. Leora stepped closer. Her ears twitched. He opened the bag and pulled out a glowing capsule. With calm hands he motioned to the kitten. She hesitated, then offered it. The human placed the capsule gently against the creature's chest. A soft hum, a pulse of light, and the kitten stirred more. Leora's eyes widened. He nodded slowly, a small smile forming. She didn't smile back. But she sat down beside him. For the first time in many seasons, the jungle wasn't silent, and somewhere, deep in the roots, life began to move again. Leora watched as the tiny kitten stretched its limbs. Its breath had steadied. The glow from the capsule faded, but the warmth in its body remained. She held it close, surprised by how quickly it responded to the human's device. Her people had nothing like this. No medicine, no hope, only silence. The human did not speak. He just studied the creature with careful eyes. Then, reaching into his bag again, he took out another small orb. This one was green and had soft lights that pulsed with rhythm. He placed it into the soil, near the roots of a nearby tree. Leora tilted her head. She had never seen such things before. He turned slightly toward her and said something. The words meant nothing, but the tone was gentle, friendly. She didn't answer. Her trust was not given easily. Still, she didn't leave. Leora watched him work. He took notes on a glowing tablet. ran his hands across dying bark and placed strange seeds into the earth. Wherever he moved, the air seemed to breathe easier. A few leaves lifted on their own. Moss darkened to green. Tiny insects returned. She sat quietly, hugging the kitten close as if afraid the magic would disappear if she blinked. The human paused now and then to glance at her. He offered a water pouch, which she refused. She had her own way of surviving. But he didn't seem offended. After a while he stood and looked around. His face looked tired but calm. He pulled up his sleeve and tapped something on his arm. A drone flew down from the ship, carrying more capsules and supplies. He waved it toward the deeper forest. Leora stepped forward. The human stopped moving. She pointed toward the west path. It led to an older grove. One the elders no longer visited, but it had once been rich with life. If anything remained, it would be there. The human looked where she pointed, then back at her. He seemed to understand. With a slight nod, he turned and started walking in that direction. Leora followed. She didn't know why she trusted him, but something about his presence made the forest feel less dead. The path grew darker. Branches above twisted like bones. The ground was dry. Leora slowed, ears alert. She didn't speak, but her body moved with purpose. The human adjusted his tablet, scanning the air. It beeped softly. He frowned. They reached the grove. What was once a sanctuary of blue-leafed trees now stood bare. Branches cracked under their feet, but in the center stood a lone vine-covered stone. Beneath it, faint chirps echoed. Leora rushed forward and pulled back the leaves. Inside a hollow log, a nest of tiny birds opened their beaks, barely alive, barely holding on. She looked at the human. He knelt beside her. Quickly, he took out another capsule. This one sprayed a soft mist into the log. The birds chirped louder, stronger. Leora's hands shook slightly. She had lived with loss for so long she forgot what saving felt like. The human set up more pods in a circle around the area. Lights blinked slowly, connecting like a web. The soil changed color. A breeze carried the smell of fresh earth. For the first time in years, she felt something new. Maybe her world was not dying. Maybe it was just waiting, and maybe, just maybe, this strange human knew how to help it live again. They walked deeper into the grove as the soft lights from the human's pods glowed behind them. Leora kept the kitten close to her chest while her eyes scanned the undergrowth. The air felt lighter, not just because of the machines, but because something inside her had changed. A new kind of hope was beginning to grow. The human pointed to a strange vine crawling up a dead tree. Its leaves were pale but wide, with a faded glow on their edges. He knelt beside it and scanned it with his tablet. His face grew serious. He turned the screen toward her. It showed numbers, colors, and strange shapes, but Leora didn't understand any of it. Still, she could feel the urgency. She leaned closer, touching the vine with the tips of her fingers. It was cold. Too cold for something still rooted in the soil. The human removed a small container from his belt and carefully scraped a bit of the leaf into it. He sealed it and tapped something on his wrist. The drone returned, dropping a small case. He placed the sample inside and sent it back into the air. Leora tilted her head. She had never seen tools that moved on their own like that. No wings, no strings, just machines that listened to humans. He walked toward the east, where the trees were thinner and the land sloped into what used to be a freshwater spring. Now it was just a hollow pit, the earth cracked and dry. The human stood still for a moment, as if the silence itself was giving him instructions. Then he turned and looked at her. He said something, slow and calm. She didn't understand the words, but she understood his eyes. He was asking for permission. Leora gave a slight nod. He opened a pouch and pulled out 3 silver orbs. With a small tap, they expanded in the air, glowing softly, then floated over the pit. Beams of light scanned the ground. Small spikes shot down and sank into the earth. Moments later, A low hum started. The orbs pulsed like a heartbeat. The soil shifted. Water bubbled slowly up. Leora gasped. The spring was waking. She stepped back, unable to speak. This wasn't magic. It wasn't her people's rituals. It was human knowledge. Quiet, careful, and powerful. The human stood at the edge, watching as the water slowly filled the broken pit. He said nothing, but there was a quiet pride in his expression. Not the pride of a conqueror. The pride of someone trying to fix what others had broken. She looked at him for a long time. He didn't destroy. He restored. She crouched beside the water and dipped her fingers in. It was cold, clean, real. The kitten mewed again in her arms, now more alert. It looked at the stream like it remembered something, like the water had returned part of its soul. Then a sound cut through the air. A sharp whistle. Leora's ears perked. Voices. Eleanae voices. She stood quickly. The human turned, confused. Figures emerged from the trees. Warriors. Her people. They stopped when they saw her, and him. Blades were drawn. The eldest warrior stepped forward, his face twisted in anger. He pointed at the human and shouted. Leora stepped between them. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She held up the kitten, alive, strong. She pointed at the stream, flowing again. The warriors hesitated. The eldest looked into her eyes. Then at the human. Then at the land around them, where glowing pods pulsed gently and green returned to the dirt. His blade lowered. For now, the human was safe. But the forest had more to say, and Leora was ready to speak for it. The warriors did not trust the human. Their eyes stayed sharp, their hands near their weapons, but none of them made a move. Leora stood close to him, a silent wall of protection. She didn't need to explain herself. The forest had already done it for her. The eldest warrior narrowed his eyes. He stepped forward slowly and looked at the kitten in her arms. It blinked up at him with bright eyes and gave a soft mew. The old warrior's lips pressed into a line, then he turned away without a word. The others followed, moving back into the trees. They would report what they had seen, but they would not attack. Not today. The human gave Leora a questioning glance. She just nodded. He seemed to understand, though no words passed between them. He looked around at the green creeping back into the ground and smiled. Then he turned back to his work. Leora followed him deeper into the forest. They reached an area she had not visited in years. Trees lay broken like bones. Blackened roots pushed up from the earth. The poison from old battles had sunk deep here. Even insects avoided it. The human walked carefully, placing scanning devices along the path. His tablet beeped faster with each step. He stopped near a patch of dry fungus and pulled out a mask. He placed it over his face and handed another one to her. Leora looked at the mask, unsure, then took it and copied his movements. Together they stepped into the dead zone. The air felt heavier, thick with decay. Ash crunched underfoot. Leora's heart beat faster. She remembered this place. Long ago it had been a nesting ground for lightwings, creatures with soft feathers and songs that glowed in the dark. Now there was only silence. The human moved faster, now urgency in his steps. He dug into the earth with a small tool, collecting samples. His gloves turned gray with dust. He looked at her again and motioned for space. She stepped back, still watching. He placed several pods into the ground, each one humming as it activated. Then he pulled out a long rod and planted it in the center. A bright light flashed upward like a signal. The earth shook slightly, and mist began to rise from the soil. Leora stared as the color changed. Not fully green, but not dead. The human stood still, checking his readings. His shoulders lowered in relief. Leora stepped forward and touched one of the pods. It was warm. Soft vibrations pulsed through her fingers. He spoke softly, pointing to the ground and then to the trees. She understood the gesture. He was trying to bring life back piece by piece. She nodded again, this time more firmly. Together they spent the next hours walking the edge of the dead zone. He mapped the damage while she guided him through hidden paths. He asked silently. She answered with gestures. When the sun lowered, golden light filtered through the branches. Insects returned to the edges. A single flower bloomed near a pod. Leora knelt beside it and stared. The flower was not one of hers. It was not from this world. But it was alive, and it was growing here. The human knelt beside her. He didn't touch it. He just watched. She realized. Then, he wasn't trying to replace her world. He was helping it breathe again. For the first time, she reached out and touched his hand. His eyes met hers. And no words were needed. The forest was listening, and it was starting to answer. The next morning began with light rain. Not heavy like storms from the old days, but gentle, like the planet remembered how to weep. Leora walked through the forest barefoot, her steps quiet on the softening ground. The air smelled different, cleaner, softer. The human was already awake, kneeling beside a set of pods he had placed the night before. The light inside them flickered like small stars, feeding something unseen beneath the soil. He turned when he saw her and offered a small smile. Leora returned it just slightly. The kitten clung to her shoulder now, stronger with each passing hour. Its fur was fuller, its eyes brighter. It purred when it saw the human and leapt into his arms without fear. He chuckled and scratched behind its ears. It was a sound she hadn't heard in a long time. A sound not of survival, but peace. He showed her his tablet again. This time, it displayed a map of the land with circles and green patches growing outward. She understood enough. The forest was recovering slowly, carefully. But it was happening. She pointed to the north. There, beyond the hills, was a sacred place, the last nesting ground of the crystal wings, long thought extinct. No one dared go there anymore. The sky had burned it during the final phase of the war. He listened carefully, nodding once. They packed quickly and moved. The journey was quiet. The land was still tired, but it no longer felt hopeless. Along the way, they saw fresh shoots pushing through cracks, small creatures poking their heads from burrows, and dew forming on leaves that hadn't held water in years. Leora moved like a guide now, not just a watcher. She no longer followed him. They walked side by side. When they reached the ridge, the sky above was dark. Thick clouds curled above. The valley. Leora paused. The air buzzed with static. The scars from the firestorm still covered the earth below. The human studied it through his lens. His face darkened. Radiation. He pulled out stronger filters, fitted them over their masks, and adjusted his gear. Leora hesitated, but when he started walking, she followed. The ground was cracked and lifeless. Bones of old trees jutted from the dirt like broken spears. Ash crunched under every step. But even here he knelt to test the soil. Every few steps he paused, scanned, checked, and moved again. Leora's heart sank. This place was worse than she remembered. Suddenly the scanner. In his hand blinked red. He froze. She stepped closer. He pointed ahead. Movement. Leora strained her ears. A soft flutter, a shimmer of light, a shape hovered just above the blackened tree. Wings of translucent color, like glass, spun from dreams. A crystal wing. She gasped. Her fingers flew to her lips. The creature tilted its head, watching them. Then another appeared, and another. 3 of them glided through the ruined valley, wings leaving trails of faint light. They circled once, then vanished behind a scorched cliff. They were alive. Leora turned to the human. Her eyes were wide, shining. He smiled. Not wide, not loud, just the kind of smile someone wears when they know they've just seen something sacred. Without a word, he pulled out a small drone and sent it toward the cliff. It carried sensors, cameras, and soft light. Not to disturb, just to observe. She touched his arm gently. Then she knelt and pressed her palm to the ground. There was warmth. Beneath the surface, the earth had not given up, and now, neither had she. The next few days were quiet but full of purpose. The human set up a base near the edge of the valley, far enough to avoid disturbing the crystal wings but close enough to study the land. Leora stayed beside him, no longer hiding. She had seen what he could do. The forest had seen it too. Together, they placed sensors through the area. The human worked with calm focus, adjusting frequencies, recording wing patterns, and scanning the soil. Leora moved like a shadow, helping him avoid sacred spots or hidden dangers in the terrain. She pointed out places where the old trees once grew and whispered which plants had healing roots. Sometimes they didn't speak at all, yet they always understood each other. At night, the valley glowed faintly. The crystal wings came out in small flocks, their wings humming as they floated between scorched trees and sleeping drones. The human never tried to touch them. He simply watched, amazed, as if every flap of their wings reminded him why he was here. One morning, the drone returned, with strange footage. It showed a group of smaller creatures living near a cracked pool, animals thought extinct decades ago. Their bodies were thin, but they survived in the shadows of radiation, building nests from burnt branches. The human looked at the images for a long time. Then he stood and began preparing something big. He opened a special case he hadn't touched before. Inside were large pods, much larger than the ones he used for soil repair. He pointed at the pool on the screen, then to the pods, and mimicked planting. Leora's eyes narrowed. She knew that area was sacred to the old spirits. Her people believed no one should enter it. Still, she didn't stop him. Instead, she led him there. The land cracked beneath their steps. It was dry, bitter, and dark. The creatures in the drone footage peeked out from behind rocks as they arrived. Leora watched them carefully. The human knelt, opened the first pod, and activated it. A low sound filled the air. Not a beep, not a hum, but something soft, like a song. The pod released tiny silver threads that melted into the ground and vanished. A faint glow appeared, in the cracks. The second pod followed, then the third. Each one changed the air. The breeze carried new scents, not strong, but different. Less death, more soil. Leora stood very still. A young creature, no bigger than her hand, crawled from behind. A rock. Its eyes blinked at her wide and unafraid. It stepped toward the glowing crack and lay down beside it as if it felt safe there. She crouched slowly and extended her hand. It didn't run. The human watched them, his eyes reflecting the soft lights, spreading beneath the ground. Then from his pack he pulled out a small flag. Not of his world, but one bearing a green leaf surrounded by stars. He didn't plant it in the ground. He simply held it. Leora looked at the symbol. Then she looked at him, and for the first time she spoke his name. He froze. It was not perfect. It carried her accent, her rhythm, but it was his name. He smiled and spoke hers back. Not perfectly either, but enough. The language between them had changed. Now they were not just working together. Now they were allies. The valley would live. And so would the bond between them. The word about the recovering valley began to spread. Other Eliani scouts, curious and cautious, came to see what Leora had helped protect. They stood at the edges, quiet and watching, not yet ready to step closer. Most still remembered the scars from the war. They still feared the tools the humans once used to destroy. But what they saw here confused them. They didn't see burning metal or loud machines. They saw soft lights, green shoots, and crystal wing, nests in silent flight. They saw the human kneeling beside a broken tree, pressing healing pods into the soil. They saw Leora beside him guiding his hands, showing him where to plant and where not to step. At first they said nothing, but they did not leave. One elder finally came forward. His name was Rayan, a strong voice among the Eliani. He had lost family in the firestorm, and had sworn never to trust any outsider again. His gaze was sharp as a blade when he walked into the human's base. Leora stood beside the human, firm. Rain looked around in silence. Then he stepped past her and crouched beside one of the glowing plants. His fingers hovered over it, then gently touched its leaf. It didn't wither. Instead, it leaned toward him. Rand stood up slowly. He didn't speak to the human, not yet. He only looked at Leora and said one word. Why? Leora's voice was steady. She explained what she had seen, the healing, the quiet, the change, the crystal wings, the soil, the spring. She told him the names of every creature that had returned. She told him how the human never once took anything, only gave. Rand listened. He did not argue. He turned to the human and gave a respectful nod. The human, confused, nodded back. Leora breathed easier. Rand returned to the others, and though he said little, his presence gave permission. The scouts began stepping forward. They asked questions. They walked the paths. And soon, they helped. The valley changed faster now. More pods were planted. More creatures were found. Each day, the human recorded new signs of life. The recovery was not just physical, it was spiritual. One evening, a young Elenite child wandered too far and fell into a deep crack near the old spring. Her leg twisted, her cries echoing through the trees. Panic rose among the watchers. Before anyone else could act, the human ran. He didn't hesitate. He slid down the slope, reached her, and checked her leg. Then gently and carefully, he pulled her into his arms and climbed back up, his arms scratched but strong. When he placed her in her mother's arms, he said nothing. He just smiled softly and stepped back. The crowd was silent. Then the mother bowed, and so did others. Leora saw it in their eyes. Something had shifted. Not just respect, but trust. The human no longer felt like a visitor. He felt like someone who belonged. That night, as the stars blinked above, Leora and the human sat, side by side near the glowing spring. The kitten now slept curled in a bed of moss, bigger and stronger. Birds called softly from the treetops, and even the crystal wings danced above in peaceful flight. Leora looked at the man beside her. She remembered the day she had feared him. Now, she couldn't imagine this forest without him. He reached into his bag and showed her a photo, his planet, full of trees and skies. It was beautiful. Alive. He looked at her and whispered one word. Together. She nodded, and this time, she smiled first. The forest no longer whispered of endings. It now sang softly of beginnings. Where ash once buried the roots, green had returned. Not all at once, not in wide floods, but slowly, leaf by leaf, root by root. The air was cooler, richer. The wind carried the scent of life, not decay. Leora stood at the edge of the valley, her eyes tracing the paths of light where once only blackened earth stretched. Below, young crystal wings hovered above new nests, their wings catching sunlight like shards of glass. Creatures once thought gone forever moved through the tall grass. Small chirps, rustling, and hums filled the world again. Behind her, the human packed his final supply crates into the drone shuttle. His mission was almost complete. The data he collected, the life he helped restore, it was all being sent back to his people. Not to claim, not to conquer, but to share what they had learned. Healing could spread, even across stars. But he wasn't leaving yet, not without saying goodbye. Leora approached him slowly. She had no weapon. She hadn't needed one for a long time now. The kitten, now fully grown, patted beside her and mewed, softly at the man. He bent down, rubbed its head, and chuckled. It rubbed against his leg like an old friend. She looked at the case in his hand. Inside were seeds. Not alien seeds, but hers. ones gathered with care and preserved using his technology. Together they had created hybrids, her roots and his knowledge. It was no longer about saving a forest, it was about giving it a future. Rain and the other elders had agreed. A new grove would be planted near the mountain base where clean rivers still flowed, a place protected by both humans and Elene. A shared land. He handed her a small glass pendant. Inside it was a drop of crystal spring water and a single glowing seed. A gift, a memory, a promise. She held it tight. He pointed to the sky where a ship would one day come to take him back, but he didn't seem eager to leave. His hand lingered in the air before falling to his side again. Then she did something he never expected. Leora stepped closer and placed her hand gently on his chest, just above his heart. She whispered something in her language. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning. She was thanking him for listening, for healing, for not giving up, and for becoming part of something greater than himself. The sun began to rise higher, bathing the valley in warm light. Birds flew from the trees, animals stirred from their dens, and the wind carried the sound of leaves brushing together like a lullaby. The human looked around one last time. Then he knelt, dug a small hole beside the newly grown tree, and planted one last pod. Not to fix anything, but to say farewell. Leora placed her hand over the soil with his. 2 worlds. 1 purpose. He stood slowly, then turned toward her. He didn't speak. He only smiled. She smiled back. As he walked toward his base, Leora stayed, behind. She looked over her forest, her creatures, her skies, and knew the world would never be the same. It was no longer a dying planet. It was home again, and he had helped make it so.